Before Gore-Tex and battery-powered parkas, there was brain-tanned buckskin. Before GPS, there were trails marked by bent trees. Native Americans weren't just living off the land, they were cold-weather scientists who mastered thermodynamics, structural engineering, and sustainable living, centuries before we made them buzzwords. While we brag about smart homes, they built shelters that could maintain 60 degrees Fahrenheit when it was negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit outside. We have the apps, but they had the answers. And it turns out the answers were better. That system, that blueprint for cheating winter, began with the most basic element of survival: what you wear. Modern survival shows treat clothing as a given, a pre-packaged advantage. But for Native Americans, it was the first and most critical piece of engineering. While today's experts struggle to last a week in sponsored gear, Native peoples thrived through bone-splitting blizzards using technology they perfected over thousands of years. They mastered techniques that our best gear designers are still trying to emulate, proving that the most effective solutions often come from the earth, not a factory. This wasn't about just staying warm, it was about creating a wearable environment, a personal shelter system that made survival in an ice-locked world possible. The star of this ancient wardrobe was brain-tanned buckskin. Forget the stiff, heavy leather you might imagine. This was something else entirely. The process of using animal brains to tan a hide created a material that was incredibly soft and pliable, something that could be bundled up without turning the wearer into a walking tippy. It was the original performance fabric. This buckskin had the almost magical ability to keep water out while still allowing the skin to breathe, wicking away sweat before it could freeze. It was ancient Gore-Tex, a high-tech solution born from biology, not a laboratory, and it formed the foundation of a sophisticated clothing strategy. Long before outdoor brands started selling expensive base layers, Native Americans had mastered the art of layering. Theirs was a three-part system, meticulously designed for maximum efficiency. The inner layer, resting against the skin, was typically made of the softest, best-treated hides, designed specifically to pull sweat away from the body. The middle layer was a zone of pure innovation, where tribes used natural insulation like shredded bark fiber or animal pelts with the fur turned inward, trapping body heat in countless tiny air pockets. The outer layer was the armor, a heavy, specially treated hide that told howling winter winds to take a hike. This wasn't just putting on more clothes, it was a calculated defense against the cold. Every single detail of their clothing served a purpose. Those iconic fringes you see on buckskin jackets weren't just for decoration. They were a piece of functional technology. The strips of leather helped to break up wind patterns and efficiently shed rainwater, channeling it away from the body. For the most extreme cold, hunters and warriors would wear multiple pairs of leggings. An elder from a plains tribe once told an early settler a simple rule for surviving the deep freeze: if you can still feel your legs, you haven't put on enough leggings yet. This wasn't fashion. It was a life or death calculation, understood with a clarity that only comes from generations of experience. The performance of this gear was astounding. The soft hides allowed for silent movement, a critical advantage when hunting prey that was just as alert and desperate in the winter months. In fact, archaeological evidence suggests that a complete Native American winter outfit could keep a person alive and functional in temperatures as low as -40 degrees Fahrenheit without a single synthetic fiber or battery-powered heating element. Of course, this technology demanded respect and maintenance. The waterproofing wasn't permanent. It had to be regularly reapplied using a mixture of animal fats and other natural materials, a constant ritual of survival. Ultimately, each piece of clothing was a testament to hours of labor, from hunting the animal to processing the hide and crafting the final garment. These weren't disposable items, they were life support systems, valued and cared for with meticulous attention. This fostered a powerful philosophy. To be poorly dressed for winter was not just uncomfortable or dangerous, it was seen as a sign of disrespect, an insult to nature, to the animal that provided the materials, and to your own fundamental skills. Survival wasn't a game, it was a craft, and your clothing was the first and most important tool. If the clothing was the first line of defense, the home was the fortress. And Native American winter homes were not the primitive, drafty huts many imagine. They were absolute masterpieces of thermal engineering, structures so well insulated that some could maintain a comfortable temperature of over 60 degrees Fahrenheit, even when the world outside was a frozen hellscape of 20 below. This wasn't luck, it was physics, a deep understanding of how to use the earth, snow, and wind to create sanctuaries of warmth. They designed homes that worked with nature, not against it, achieving a level of efficiency that modern construction, with all its power tools and synthetic materials, often struggles to match. On the Great Plains, tribes like the Mandan and Hidatsa built earth lodges, which were less like houses and more like natural fortresses. By building them partially underground, they used the planet itself as their primary insulation. The walls were several feet thick, constructed from massive wooden beams and covered in a dense layer of packed earth and sod. This design effectively harnessed the stable temperature of the ground, creating a space that was cool in the summer and remarkably warm in the winter. These weren't small, isolated dwellings. A single lodge could house multiple families, creating a self-contained community, a bustling hub of life sheltered from the deadliest blizzards. In the Northeast, the Iroquois and other tribes built longhouses, the apartment complexes of their time. These were massive wooden halls, some stretching up to 400 feet long, that could house an entire clan. A series of fires would run down the central corridor, and the design ingeniously used the smoke to its advantage. As the hot smoke rose, it would warm the air in the vast upper space of the longhouse before exiting through vents in the roof. This created a natural and continuous heating system, a slow-moving current of warmth that circulated through the entire structure. It was a simple yet brilliant way to heat a massive communal space efficiently. Even the seemingly simplest shelters were marvels of design. The wickiups used by tribes in the Great Basin looked like small, unassuming domes, but their construction was incredibly clever. Builders would weave thick layers of grass, brush, and bark into the walls, a technique that created countless tiny air pockets. This is the exact same principle behind modern fiberglass insulation, a natural and incredibly effective way to trap heat. Furthermore, they would study the prevailing winds and deliberately angle the single entrance away from them, creating a home with almost no draft. It was maximum efficiency with minimum resources. This architectural genius went beyond single structures. Archaeologists studying ancient winter camps have discovered that some tribes deliberately built their homes in clusters, creating small, interlocking communities. This layout acted as a massive windbreak for the entire settlement, reducing the brutal force of the wind and lowering the effective wind chill for everyone by as much as 30%. Excavations have even revealed that some builders used different types of soil in distinct layers within their walls, knowing that certain soils held heat better than others. This wasn't just building, it was materials science, a quiet, forgotten expertise. These weren't just places to sleep, they were living, breathing examples of a different way of thinking. Every structure, from the subterranean lodge to the grass-woven wickiup, was a testament to the philosophy of working in partnership with the environment. They embraced the insulating power of snow and earth, turning the elements of winter from an enemy into an ally. They created homes that were not only shelters but also community centers, warm, vibrant spaces where stories were told, families were raised, and the brutal cold was kept safely at bay just outside the door. Once you were clothed and sheltered, the next battle was for the heart of the home, the fire. In the dead of winter, fire was far more than just warmth. It was the engine of survival. It cooked the food, purified the water, hardened the tools, and provided the light in the suffocating darkness of a 16-hour night. Controlling this element, especially in a world that was often frozen, damp, and hostile to flame, was not a simple chore. It was a science, an art form passed down through generations, and a discipline that required a level of mastery that is difficult to comprehend today. Their control over fire was absolute, turning a simple chemical reaction into the force that held their entire world together. The ability to create fire from nothing in the middle of a blizzard is a near supernatural feat, but for many tribes, it was a standard procedure. Their primary tool, the bow drill, might look primitive, but in the hands of an expert, it was a precision instrument. A skilled operator could coax a glowing coal from friction in under 30 seconds. This speed wasn't just about muscle, it was about knowledge. They possessed a botanist's understanding of their environment, knowing that certain woods, like cedar and yucca, were far superior for creating embers. It was applied physics, understanding the perfect combination of pressure, speed, and material to generate life-giving heat on demand. But creating fire was often the last resort. The truly efficient method was to never let it die. Many tribes had designated firekeepers, individuals whose sole responsibility was to preserve a living flame. Instead of starting from scratch, they would carefully preserve embers for days or even weeks at a time. They would take a glowing coal and place it in a transportable bundle of slow-burning material, like a fungus, which was then wrapped in something like birch bark. This created a portable, smoldering fire starter. One elder recalled a story of their grandmother keeping a single coal alive for up to 2 weeks during a brutal winter migration, a stunning testament to the skill and sacred duty involved in carrying the flame. The fire pits themselves were not just holes in the ground, they were engineered heating systems. Some tribes would line their pits with specific types of stone, especially soapstone, which has a high thermal mass. These rocks would absorb heat from the fire and then radiate it slowly back into the dwelling for hours after the flames had died down, acting as a natural, slow-release radiator through the coldest parts of the night. Their knowledge extended to fuel science as well. They knew that dense hardwoods like oak and hickory were the MVPs of winter fires, as they burned hotter and dramatically slower than softer woods. When modern scientists tested these traditional wood combinations, they found the heat output was up to 40% more efficient than using a random selection of firewood. Mastering fire also meant taming its challenges, particularly moisture and smoke. They planned ahead, gathering and storing large quantities of birch bark because they knew its natural oils would allow it to catch fire even when wet. In enclosed shelters, managing smoke was a critical matter of life and death. Each tribe developed its own ingenious solutions. Some designed their fire pits with underground air channels that would feed oxygen to the base of the fire, allowing for a cleaner, hotter burn with significantly less smoke. Others created complex draft systems within their longhouses and lodges, manipulating air currents to pull smoke up and out of the living space. It was, in effect, a pre-industrial HVAC system. This carefully controlled flame was the center of their universe. It was their kitchen stove, their water purifier, and their workshop, providing the light needed for crafting tools and repairing gear. But it was also their original social media, the glowing hearth around which stories were told, lessons were taught, and the bonds of community were forged against the darkness outside. The ultimate proof of their mastery is in the records of a fire being kept continuously alive by a single tribe throughout an entire winter season for over 100 days straight. It was a constant living pulse in the heart of the frozen world. A warm home and perfect clothing are useless if you starve to death inside it. The next layer in this masterclass of survival was ensuring a steady supply of fuel for the human body, a challenge that required a level of foresight and scientific understanding that dwarfs our modern reliance on electricity and refrigeration. Native Americans mastered the art of food preservation long before the first freezer was ever imagined, creating food stores so stable and nutritious that they could last not just through one winter, but potentially through several. They didn't just hope for a good hunt, they built a resilient system of caloric wealth that made them shock-proof to the brutalities of a frozen world. This wasn't just about stockpiling food, it was about creating long-term nutritional security. The cornerstone of this system was a true superfood, pemmican. This was not just trail mix, it was the ultimate survival ration, a dense, high-energy bar engineered for longevity and portability. The process involved pounding lean meat, often bison, into a fine powder, mixing it with an equal amount of hot, rendered fat, and then adding dried berries for vitamins and flavor. This mixture was then packed tightly into pouches. The result was a food so nutritionally dense that just a few pounds could sustain a warrior or hunter for months on end. It was lightweight, required no cooking, and was virtually indestructible. In fact, a modern study on a preserved sample of traditionally made pemmican concluded it could remain edible for up to 50 years. But their pantry was diverse and ingenious. They understood that acorns, while abundant, were poisonous due to high levels of tannins. So they developed a leaching process, soaking the nuts in running water to remove the bitterness and toxins, leaving behind a nutritious, protein-rich flour. A single mature oak tree could produce up to 2,000 pounds of these nuts, a massive windfall for those who knew its secret. In the Great Lakes region, tribes harvested wild rice, with some families gathering as much as 300 pounds per season. They would dry it and store it in specially crafted birch bark containers, which have been shown to be more effective at preventing spoilage than some modern plastics. And for a touch of morale, some tribes would mix berries and animal fat with fresh snow, creating a simple, nutrient-dense ice cream. This incredible bounty had to be stored, and their solution was to turn the earth itself into a refrigerator. They dug deep pits and created snow caves, going below the frost line where the ambient temperature remained remarkably stable. These natural cellars stayed at a consistent 32 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, the exact temperature range of a modern fridge, but without any need for a power grid. To manage this inventory, some tribes became master weavers, creating enormous storage baskets capable of holding hundreds of pounds of dried food. Their diet was calorie-intensive by necessity. A hunter working in the brutal cold might consume up to 5,000 calories a day, relying on a high-fat diet that was, as recent studies have shown, perfectly balanced for providing sustained energy and warmth in freezing conditions. With food secured, the final piece of the puzzle was mobility. Being trapped in your shelter was a death sentence. To hunt, to trade, to connect with other communities, they had to conquer the snow, and they did so by engineering tools that turned deep powder from an obstacle into a highway. At the heart of this was the snowshoe. These were not the clumsy, one-size-fits-all items you find in a sporting goods store. Each tribe developed unique styles, custom-engineered for their specific local snow conditions. The Ojibwe, traveling over wide, open terrain, crafted long, narrow snowshoes built for speed, allowing a traveler to cover an astonishing 70 miles in a single day. The Cree, navigating deep, soft powder in the forest, developed a wider, rounded bear paw style for maximum flotation. This was sophisticated technology. A well-made pair of traditional snowshoes could distribute a person's weight over 3 square feet of snow, reducing ground pressure by up to 85%, and allowing them to glide effortlessly over drifts that would swallow an unprepared person whole. The records of their endurance are staggering, with one documented journey covering 3,000 miles in a single winter season. These snowshoes were maintained with the same care as any critical tool, waterproofed with coatings of animal fat that could last for months of heavy use. They were the all-terrain vehicle of the ancient world, perfectly adapted and flawlessly executed. For hauling heavy loads, they deployed the dog sled. A well-trained team of dogs could pull up to 1,500 pounds of cargo and travel 100 miles in a day. The sleds themselves were feats of engineering, built from flexible wood that could absorb shock and bend around obstacles, but the real genius was in the runners. They would often coat them with a layer of moss or peat, spray it with water, and let it freeze into a smooth, icy surface. Modern tests have shown that this iced runner reduces friction better than any modern synthetic material like Teflon. In fact, when tested by engineers, these traditional sled designs proved to be up to 30% more energy efficient than the first mechanical snowmobiles. Finally, this movement wasn't random. They weren't just wandering through the wilderness. Many tribes developed and maintained a complex network of winter trails, a system that functioned like our modern highways. These routes were carefully marked using bent trees, distinct rock formations, and other natural signposts, creating a known and navigable landscape. This network connected villages, hunting grounds, and trapping lines, ensuring that even in the deepest winter, they were not isolated. They were masters of their entire domain, with the food, the tools, and the infrastructure to not just survive the winter, but to own it. All the gear, all the food, and all the brilliant architecture were just pieces of a much larger machine. The final and most important secret to Native American winter survival wasn't a physical object. It was a social technology. Surviving the deep cold wasn't a one-person show, a heroic individual against the elements. It was a team sport, a brutally efficient and highly coordinated effort that was something like a really intense family reunion that lasted for months. Every single person had a role, a purpose that was critical to the survival of the whole. This was their true genius, the understanding that the strength of the community was the most powerful weapon against the cold. This was a society with no unemployment. From the smallest child to the most revered elder, everyone had a job. The fire tenders held one of the most critical roles, tasked with the sacred duty of keeping the communal fires alive 24/7. Some tribes designated specific families whose sole winter purpose was to ensure the flame never died. The hunters were the tribe's winter warriors, venturing out into the biting cold not as lone heroes, but as coordinated teams. They used silent hand signals and possessed incredible tracking skills, able to follow an animal's trail just by studying the slightly melted spots its body heat left in the snow. While the hunters provided for the body, the storytellers provided for the soul and the mind. They were the original Netflix, gathering everyone around the fire during the long, dark nights. But their stories were far more than entertainment. They were encrypted packages of vital information containing complex survival lessons, moral teachings, and the entire history of the tribe. A single Cree elder might be able to recall over 200 different winter survival stories from memory, a living library of knowledge. In parallel, the medicine keepers acted as the tribe's doctors and pharmacists, storing and preparing remedies for the inevitable winter illnesses. Their botanical knowledge was so advanced that when the first European settlers arrived, many desperately sought out native healers to help them survive the harsh new world. Even the children had critical responsibilities. They were tasked with gathering tinder, checking trap lines, and helping to mend winter clothing. But their most important job was to listen, to absorb the stories and the lessons, ensuring that the tribe's collective knowledge, its blueprint for survival, would be passed down to the next generation. This total integration of every member was reinforced by a conscious effort to maintain morale. They knew that psychological endurance was just as important as physical warmth. Tribes held winter games and competitions that were not only fun but also served the practical purpose of keeping everyone active, warm, and bonded together. Some even had indoor ball games they could play inside their spacious lodges during the worst blizzards. Ultimately, all of this was built on one simple, unwavering truth that every member understood in their bones. Your survival depended on everyone else's survival. This wasn't a feel-good platitude, it was the fundamental, unbending law of their world. This shared dependency created an incredible social bond, a web of mutual obligation and trust that was stronger than any winter storm. And perhaps this is the greatest secret we have lost. It wasn't just about having the right gear or the right shelter. It was about having the right people around you, because the community itself was the ultimate survival tool. Their gear, their shelters, and their food systems were brilliant, but their true lost secret was the community that bound it all together, a social technology we still can't copy. It proves that true survival isn't about what you own, but about what you owe to each other. If you thought you knew history, think again. Subscribe and join the deep dive.